guys. Welcome back to Owl 003. The best remote viewing you're ever going to see is right here on Owl 003. Um, and usually I have remote viewing sessions. I talk everything remote viewing, but I do have people on occasion that I find interesting. And today I've got a really interesting guy um, who, in this topic, sometimes things kind of bleed together and you end up meeting some very interesting people. So um, today I have as a guest Brian Singh. He is the creator of the 2024 disclosure, full disclosure now. Is that correct?
Yep, full disclosure now
Conference. Yep.
conferences. Yep.
And you got one coming up next year. It was a big success, the one you just had down here by me actually, but in St. Pete Friday or in Florida. So I'm looking forward to. I'd like to catch the one next year. Um, and you also have a Facebook group too, right? That
Yeah, I've got the full disclosure now Facebook group, which people can participate in and post all their stuff. Then I've got the conference page, the 2025 now full disclosure now conference page, and then also a general full disclosure page. I'm trying to get the you know take up kind of some media real estate, if you will, to get disclosure, particularly full disclosure, the good, the bad, and the ugly on the map. And it's kind of a crowded field, but that's a good thing in my mind.
mm,
What's not good is it seems that, I'll be a little bit critical here. Not every player on the scene is in it for the movement to advance the liberation of humanity. Some people have ulterior motives. Some people are literally compromised by darker forces and elements. Some people are just in it for the clicks, and it's
mhm,
everything in between. And then there are the real people who, I seek out and want to get on the air like yourself and get in front of people live in person at the conferences who are being banned and normally are difficult to find and need to be promoted and um, get exposure by getting on everyone else's shows and all of us working
mhm.
together.
Absolutely. And I just from my peripheral, I've seen you on Facebook. I've seen your group. It looks like you're doing really well. You got a lot of well-known guests um, from the conferences. It looks like you're doing a great job. I mean, as far as pushing things forward from my perspective. And
Thank you.
in talking about, it's interesting because you did have my field is remote viewing based. A lot of my, but I get a lot of tasks, a lot of esoteric targets that kind of go hand in glove with a lot of the things that you have talked, as well as Courtney and his group. You had Yeme Janae at her, who's a very proficient remote viewer from out of Farsight. Um, and so, first of all, let's get into some of these individuals you've met, you've talked from their perspective. Um, what was I'm sure you talked to Yeme. What did you get out of her as far as her perspective, remote viewing all these crazy things?
So I gotta say it's wonderful to meet Yemi and every one of the presenters in person. Everyone pretty much is just like how we are, on across the screen. Just meeting them in person is just, I feel like I'm seeing, with Yemi and Arkeem and everyone. It's kind of like I've already known them, and Arkeem was my roommate here for housemate here for a while, along with his girlfriend Kat. Um, it's really interesting though, because when you're in person, you get to have those conversations that you don't get to have as much online, and trying to catch people. When you're there in person at the beach and you get to chill with them, you get to ask them, get into the longer, in-depth conversations. And what I found really fascinating, and perhaps as Sony does a lot of remote viewing yourself, David, you might find that, at least in Yemi's case, she's tasked with all these amazing targets, but she herself doesn't do a lot of reading up on the targets, not any
Mhm.
research on them. For her, she's given a blind target. She works the target, does a 2 hour session, gives her data to Dr. Brown, and
Mhm.
next,
Yeah,
so
she's
for
blind.
her,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But
yeah,
she's blind to the
yeah,
target, and she has no investment in the outcome other than just bringing the best data she can by non-local means. That's it. Yeah,
exactly.
professional.
And
Yeah.
then and then at the same time, she'll tell me she asks the beings, because she'll be telepathically communicating with them sometimes. So
Mm.
when she remote views them and targets them, she can actually communicate with them. Um, and they she asks them, do you know who I am? And they'll laugh. Like, of course they know who she is,
Yeah.
and I think that's really funny too, because of course they know who you are, Yemi. So there's that aspect, and then getting to see, um, her feedback from being at our conference and meeting all these presenters herself, who she's done blind remote viewing on them and their exploits and adventures and things that they've gone through as targets. And then she's getting to talk to them and find out, okay, what was really going on. And it's enlightening to see her get that perspective and all this data getting filled in, where she's just coming in blind.
Absolutely, yeah. Also, they've done, and actually, I think it was targeted around Sirius B, but they did basically Tony's kind of like Tony's backstory.
Yeah, Series Colony Cavalier. They
Yeah,
did. They
yeah,
absolutely did. And they
hmm
confirmed it.
yeah, yeah. And actually, what's interesting too is I've been working with Elka recently, who
Yep.
is really a heavy hitter remote viewer. I'm like, where have you been hiding? Because in the remote viewing community, she's really not. She's kind of quiet, relatively. She kind of does her own
She's
thing.
because she's more the SSP community who's a super powerful remote viewer, and then so most of her stuff is geared towards secret space programs
Yeah.
and things like that. And then what I found is, I won't name names, but I found that there are remote viewers out there where they'll do these targets and then they'll poo-poo their own data. It's like, wait a second, like you got to hit hits and hits, and then but then you hear this person's testimony and you make fun of them, and it's like
hmm
I don't get it. It's like they can't accept their own data. Then I'm laughing because I'm seeing the data and I kind of matching it up with everyone's testimonies, and it seems like it makes more sense to me, and it's their data. It's
Yeah,
their remote
absolutely.
viewing sessions.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy because I've had my own situation where literally I did it was the Ashtar Command situation that took over the radio station way back in the day, and I
The
remember seeing a video of
70s,
it.
right?
Yeah, yeah, I saw a video of it. And I thought it was hilarious. I'm like, yeah, right. I thought it was so silly, and that was my conscious mind thought it was ridiculous. And then I end up years later, I get tasked this target, and that's exactly what I had. Was these ships came up, they took over the broadcast, they were basically making some big announcement, and it kind of is like you could really have a situation. It's like, whoa, my subconscious is even though consciously I didn't, but this is what the data is telling me. And you see a lot of that collaboration. So I have to say, even out of Farsight's group, I get a lot of collaborative data. So as far as what's going on there, I think as this is moves on, it's getting more and more interesting. Um, but so who else have you talked to in interviews and stuff as far as from the SSP?
Penny Bradley. Um, and let's see, in terms of interviews now, because like I've talked to a lot of people, just trying to figure out who I've done actual interviews with, and Tony and Tyler Kawala, because even though he's one of the Journey to Truth co-hosts, he doesn't speak much about it, but he was gracious enough to come onto our program with Arkeem and I, Disclosure Now, and we interviewed him about some of his own MyLabs and potentially linked to SSP experiences.
Mm.
And then I mean, I know a whole bunch of people uh, just off the books, but also like I think I've done shows with Drago Reed. Um, maybe I don't think I've done anything yet with Alondra Markman, but he was one of the presenters at the conference. Um, you know, uh, I've worked with James Rink before for the 2023 Montauk Adventure Tour. I co-organized that with him. Um, let's see, when I on that Montauk Adventure Tour, then there were a lot of people on that, and they're public as well. Like Chastity Campbell was there, and then a few people who weren't public at that time still aren't public. Colin Fraser is just coming public now. So I can name a number of people, and then being there literally at Camp Hero in Montauk, New York, on the east end of Long Island. Um, New York area by the lighthouse and getting to speak with them together separately. And people were having memories of flying lessons right there at that lighthouse at
Mhm.
Montauk Point.
Yeah. Also, you did just want to mention, so I interrupt, the Montauk tour. You were involved in that. Also, you said
Hmm.
last year, was
Hmm.
it? Now, could I ask you when these people have these, it's referred to the 20 and back, a lot of them. which if you think about it, if you were going to have this organization and get away with it without really nobody having any, but you need these bodies to throw at all this. Where are you going to get it? How are you going to do it? Um, it's interesting, and they all basically have that same kind of that same story of it. Now, when these memories of these things propagate for these individuals, how does that happen? Is it different for all of them, or have you got that out of them as far as oh they
For every individual, it's different, but there are a lot of common themes.
okay
Okay, the vast majority of people, they have had their memories wiped, and then oftentimes they'll have screen memories, and that's the difficult part, I think, is distinguishing between what's a real and what's a screen memory, and being messed with. And then um, sometimes they'll have recall because they're watching a documentary and then all of a sudden they get flashbacks or they get physically ill during certain scenes that are triggering, like when
mm,
they're depicting scenes of MK Ultra abuse or ritual abuse, for example. Um, it seems like a lot of the people, because they were in these programs as children, and then they were put back when they were children, and then it took them decades to kind of get through these programming um, methodologies like omega programming, which is
mm-hmm,
suicide self-destruction programming if you start to remember too much and reveal too much you know
mm-hmm, yeah
um, as people get older, they get more sovereign. They get their own sense of right and wrong and themselves, and I think that's a huge thing that breaks down the programming. um, People have like exist down here in our 3D lives, but because they were in these programs, they literally have altars that are in other places, not just here on Earth, but maybe in other times and on other planets. And those clone bodies are inhabited with altars or that maybe contain soul fragments of that person. So there's like literally a piece of that person existing somewhere
mm-hmm,
else in another body on another planet as an altar. That that clone with that alter soul fragment personality can physically die. And then that gives that alter, that soul fragment, the possibility to come back to reintegrate into the original person who that fragment was originally broken off of. At that point, there are people who then get recall because of reintegration with this soul fragment of themselves. They might get memories back.
hmm.
There are other people who that clone alter with a soul fragment is still alive out there in space somewhere, for example, and they may be telepathically in communication now with that alter. And this is rare, and it's supposed to be very frowned upon by these secret space programs because they do not want communication between the beings, the people who are mostly, for the most part, enslaved and lied to in the secret space programs communicating with us here on Earth, who in many ways we're being enslaved and lied to down here. And they don't want the different slave groupings or colonies to know that we exist, one another exists.
Yeah, stay in your own lane, stay in your little bubble. um let me let me ask you this because the one thing I've seen when I've ever seen these people talk about this, I've seen several. They all have a very similar experience, different experiences, but the same are all overall kind of a theme. Like they're not all in the same unit necessarily or whatever, but uh, they seem to have been wrapped up in the same kind of overall organization. This secret space program. But um, to me, it all sounds horribly traumatic. I mean, it all sounds like a living nightmare. I mean, you're stuck somewhere against your will. Basically, you're going to be there for however many years. You're experiencing terrible things, programming of all kinds, a deprogramming, whatever, um, and just put through all these hellish experiences. It's amazing that any recovery is even possible, considering how horrifying it is for the
Yeah,
individual.
there are a couple of things about that. It's 100% by design to be as horrible, terrible, loser, farian, hate to say it, pedophilic, in slavery, enslavement as possible. because it's all about oppression, and it's all about harvesting and exploiting and using people and their energy, and at the end using their bodily and their blood products. So it's when you've got a system that's so terrible and based on exploitation, it's based on hate and fear ultimately, and that's its control mechanism. And there have been critics who said, "Wait, there's no way you could have built all these underground military bases and build these amazing space fleets and this and that, with all the stolen taxpayer money." And people like Penny Bradley and Tony Rodriguez point out, rightly so, that the vast majority of the labor in these programs is slave labor. And when you do slave labor and add up the trillions of dollars that have been stolen, now all of a sudden these terrible, horrible programs become viable.
Mhm.
If you were
Yeah,
paying people to do them, they wouldn't
yeah.
have to be so horrible and oppressive and terrible. But then again, it's because of the very nature of the people who are running them and their goals and objectives. For example, they don't run the space programs to protect Earth and to, make this a better solar system, and advance humanity and Star Trek future, which so many of us are working for and want. They do it because to them, they're protecting Earth as part of the fiefdom for the Draco reptilian empire and the Anunnaki who've been working together to exploit us all this time. And um, that's their whole empire is based on fear and exploitation. So why wouldn't that mirror down as above, so below, as within, so without down here?
Yeah, and from what I gather, and because I've run into these these reptilians at like in a couple of sessions, very rarely. Um, and if you ask like the people at Farsight who've done a lot of them, um, they're more at they're kind of running the show. So as far as on that end, so they are more like puppeteers, at least to that degree, is what it seems like. But it's sad to say because I'm sure a lot of people in their mind when they think about space and all this stuff, if these things are out there, that oh, it's like some kind of odyssey, and it's like a David Bowie video, oh, it's all good, everything. It's nothing like that. It's a total nightmare.
Well, it's funny you mentioned David Bowie. According to John Whitberg, at least, and probably others, he's a secret space program person as well. And David Bowie, the David Bowie we've seen, that may have been a clone for all we know. Apparently, there's a David Bowie. He's up there somewhere, and um, the spiders on Mars. That's real. That's part of the Mars program in hunting down the ant people of Mars. And there's also a humanoid race on Mars. You also have these spiders that are kind of like literally the size of dogs and larger. And the ant people are literally in telepathic communication. They can communicate with these beings. I mean, heck, I have a housemate who can telepathically communicate with her dogs. Okay,
Well,
so
those are those the ones that Tony was dealing with? But there's
yeah,
Tony.
I mean,
Tony
well, it
dealt
might
with,
have been
yeah, yeah.
where like
Well, I know
they'll
Tony
sting
had
you
been,
and they have a nasty sting and they paralyze you and then they'll drag you into their burrow and then feed you to their young.
yeah, yeah. Elka had tasked me recently on Sirius B and pyramid technology and stuff, and it was a sad situation. I mean, it was just, I had refugees coming on and off. I just, military personnel, grab your stuff, get you. And what was surprising to me was there was these insectoid types there, and we weren't the good guys. That's what
No,
was
we're the
surprising to me.
invaders.
Yeah,
Our
yeah.
Arcum speaks about this. The secret space program, like I said, it's not here to protect the Earth. It's here to, maintain Earth as a fiefdom for the Dracos and the Anunnaki. And then it's also they add the Vietnamization, if you will, where you take the little humans, turn some of us into super soldiers, and then use us to further the the empire. And that's actually what the Draco are apparently very known for, is they don't like to get their own hands dirty. They like to take all the beings that they enslave and then put them to work to advance the empire.
Mm, yeah. I have read a lot of Tom DeLonge's work as well.
Hmm.
What is your take on To the Stars and Lou Elizondo and all that?
Uh, I like Lou Elizondo personally. I guess I'm okay with Tom DeLonge. You know, I don't really like his music, um, and 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 their whole approach is to me a big yawn. You know, it's kind of like they're trying to do these big hearings and things like that, and get airtime on the lamestream media and kind of slow drip information that at the end of the day is a big nothing burger. And then here are people like you and I and the rest of our community easily found on Facebook. And you know the testimonies of the people, many of them are my friends and presenters at my events now. They're mind blowing, and it's like, why are we wasting our time talking to Tom DeLonge? I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
talk to Tom DeLonge. I want to talk to Penny
Yeah.
Bradley.
Yeah.
I want to talk to Tony Rodriguez. I want to talk
Mm,
to Matthew Mornian. I
mm,
want to talk to, you know, Tyler about the things that he's experienced. You know, I don't give a shit about Tom
yeah.
DeLonge. No
Yeah.
offense,
Yeah. No,
you know,
I
but it's like
understand.
people shouldn't care about me, you know?
Yeah.
Like I'm here, you know.
My frustration with that whole effort is it's such it, at the rate in the kind of the way they're going is so much of a slow drip. Like the first thing in my like, okay, let's get past all this right away because we know all this. First of all, let's talk about the abduction phenomena that we've been discrediting people for the past however many decades, having these horrible experiences and saying you're crazy, these horrible experiences, and obviously that's happening. And they just kind of sweep that part of it under the rug.
Of course, and that's because that really ties into the bad and the ugly of, you know, these Illuminati cabal governments all over the world, not just to the Western world, but you know China as well, and are making deals with these different ET groups. And for example, the 1954 Greada Treaty under the Eisenhower administration, according to Laura Eisenhower, right, one of my friends and presenters and a great granddaughter of President Dwight Eisenhower. Um, that treaty was to a large extent signed behind his back. Those provisions were not cool, and those provisions weren't even abided by. You know, they took way more humans than they said they would. For what's supposed to be limited experimentation, that's not true. You know, all sorts of stuff. And it's only gotten worse. Apparently, they re-signed these treaties like every decade, and you know, part of the disclosure movement is to prepare humanity so that we can have actual disclosure, get our society much more in alignment with truth, and then that paves the way for the positive galactic ETs to make an appearance without violating the prime directive, which they very, 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 very much do care about. That is a thing.
Yeah. Now Eisenhower, he's the because I had isn't he the one that did the speech about the military industrial complex? Was that him? Okay?
Yes,
Because I
that was
was
his
out.
outgoing presidential speech,
Yes,
and that
yes.
was
Okay.
unheard of
Yeah.
to say that.
I was tasked him, and I was specifically, and again, I'm completely blind. I'm typically remote viewing, which actually is what helps it work, makes it work, is being blind. But when I asked him, I was supposed to ask him some question. I didn't know what the question was, but I asked him, and he got so defensive. Like when I was probing his mind about that, because in my sense I got was he was kind of duped in a sense. Like he kind
Yeah,
of
he's
yeah. Yeah. And he was kind of like, well, see what you would do in that situation, kind of a thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and part of it is, you know, it's like it was under his administration, but people act like his word is the end all be all. Even if he said no, f this, tear up the agreement. I mean, personally am in doubt as to whether, you know, because for example, no U.S. president has ever been on like the Majestic 12 group, as far as I know, and that was back in the day. And then there's something known as cosmic clearance or cosmos clearance, and apparently no president's ever had that level of clearance. So if you know he's a president back in the 1950s after World War II as a war hero, and he's not given clearance back then,
Hmm.
okay, then is there any surprise that they would sign a piece of paper behind his back? Not really.
Yeah, I mean, and from my perspective, again, because some of these things, like I've been tasked like some UFO events where names like Raytheon pops in. You know what I mean? Like
Oh
I'm
yeah,
like, what's
well, of
that
course.
doing here? You know what I mean? Like,
Because Raytheon, Boeing, EG&G, they've all been tasked over the years with reverse engineering and then producing a lot of this technology, whether it's craft like the TR-3B triangles, or jump gates, or the med bed type, reverse engineered technology is as good as they can get it. Somebody has to make this stuff, and there you go.
yeah,
Yeah, Raytheon's definitely been a huge name on the scene since forever.
yeah, yeah. They and it just it makes a lot of sense. I mean, even and this comes from a lot, I mean, just from all perspectives, from it's these companies, these private companies with inside, uh, you know, back even back in the day, they must have had some kind of inside connection with private contractors who got the opportunity to get rich. Um, and that's what they did. They got the technology, they got rich on it, and then they sat on it publicly. And meanwhile, kind of holding these cards of this high-end
Exactly.
technology.
Yeah, and there's a leaked document. It's a transcript of a like a five-star general meeting with an executive or top scientist. I think it's of EG and G. And the scientist is basically telling the general, no, you can't come to our facilities. No, we're not going to give you a tour and open up the books and our doors. Go jump in a lake. You are not cleared for this. And it
Hmm.
really pissed that general off. And
Hmm.
somehow or other, that transcript got leaked to the public. It's out there. It's
Yeah,
a wonder. It's amazing.
I think that's how they're getting around a lot of all this, is because we don't own it. These private contractors own this stuff. We're just
Yeah.
leasing it or whatever. But it's not.
Well, there's something
This.
called the National Secrecy Act. And basically anything that the any technology that the military uses and deems to be necessary or whatever to keep under wraps because it's a matter of national security, then they have, per their laws or whatever, the ability, per that law or whatever you want to call it, abomination of a law, they're allowed to do whatever it takes to maintain that as a secret. So when you look at all the free energy people, the magnetic motors, the water engines, all the people who've been died and suicided or locked up over the decades, that goes all the way back to right there, the post World War II era. There's actually, Penny Bradley presented on this and starts right off with that military, that Secrets Act.
Yeah. So going back to um, World War II, what I mean, I was talking to you earlier about what we had with
The
with
breakaway German
yes,
civilizations.
yes.
So essentially, in a nutshell, Maria Orsic, before the Nazis rose to power in Germany, was getting telepathic communications from the Nordic-looking ETs from Aldebaran, who had their own um, uh, intentions.
Were they
Okay,
called
and
the
then
Vrag or something? What are they?
the
The
Vril,
Vril. That's what it was. Okay.
right? Because there's something known as a Vrilya or a Vril life force, and then does not to be confused with the Donald Marshall Vril, the underground type one, two, and three lizard underground dwelling reptilians
Mm,
who
okay.
can are parasites and nasty. These were I guess more Scandinavian looking ETs who gave Maria Orsic and her Vril group and the Thule Society, who were then swept up by the Nazis, right? And that whole Black Sun group, um, to give them the technology to build things like Hitler's Bell, Die Glocken, and then also the Nazi UFO craft that have like the turrets, the Nazi Panzer turrets on them with
Hmm.
like the Iron Cross. So those were real.
Yeah.
And with that technology, the Nazis, they didn't have enough towards the official end of World War II, to mass produce the technology and weaponize it, and then turn the tide against both the Soviets and the U.S., and everyone else piling in onto Germany and Japan at the end of World War II. So they fled to New Schwabenland, a base of theirs in Antarctica. Okay, and they also, through Operation Paperclip and the CIA, they were the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS during World War II, when we were supposedly friends with the Soviet Union to defeat the Nazis. Then they swapped over to the CIA, and then that's when Uncle Joe became bloody Stalin Joe. Got to take him out, and that was the Cold War. Meanwhile, the Germans, they really had won World War II, and that was why the U.S. sent the Operation High Jump, supposedly a research group consisting of a naval battle group,
Yeah, a
down
whole
to
battalion of
Antarctica.
ships,
Right, and
battalion
they
of
were wiped out,
aircraft carriers, ice
and
block
they
crushers. Yeah.
yeah, and they were wiped out. And the Farsight Institute blind remote viewed this, and they have like a 2.5 hour movie on this where their three or four or five of their remote viewers did that hit that as a target, and they give kind of a blow by blow.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so that was also as a warning why the Germans flew the UFOs over Washington D.C. over the Capitol. That
Hmm.
was a Luftwaffe formation.
Which that
Okay,
I know that photograph in history is well known. There's
very well done, of
like
course.
there's a bunch of them, and it's over the
Because
Capitol.
they did several fly, they did at least two flyovers, I believe, and
Yeah.
the point was to make it over the Capitol to say we're in charge.
Here's my
And
thumb. I could squish you at any time, type of thing.
anytime, anytime we could reveal this and turn this whole cart upside down, and you guys want to maintain the charade under us, you can be our puppets who will live high on the hog. Fine. If not, we'll just upset the apple cart, and you can just be puppets like everyone. I mean, little minions like everyone else, and not be the well-fed puppets, the house slaves. You can be the field slaves. Right.
Now the U.S. has tried to, well, when back to World War II, when they because the scientists, I remember the scientists, everybody was after the German scientists,
Yeah,
and at the
Werner von
time,
Braun, for
yeah, yeah,
example.
yeah. At the time, it was set up for rockets, this and that. But it makes me wonder if it might have been more than that. It makes me wonder if they
Oh,
had eyes on
absolutely.
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, because they had that, I forget what it's like, alternative three, and there was this brain drain in the 50s and 60s and 70s, maybe even in the 80s, where lots of world scientists and smart people and were disappearing. What may be that was when the U.S. was starting with Werner von Braun was starting up its own secret space programs to catch up with the German breakaway civilization.
Now, did they? I mean, have you seen anything? Have you heard anything that would indicate that either Russia or the U.S. got hands-on materials out of Germany or out of that
Oh
situation?
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the
Uh,
secret space program, you got the USS Hillenketter, as co-designed by William Tompkins, who wrote Selected by Extraterrestrials, and he joined these programs very early on because the Navy selected him because he had like a perfect memory, and as a child in his teens, he was making like perfect models of battleships and destroyers and aircraft carriers. And so um, you got the band 30 Seconds to Mars with Jared Leto. That's apparently about the jump rooms to get to Mars. It takes 30 seconds to get to Mars and through some of this jump room technology.
hmm.
Um, yeah, you've got apparently there's a lunar operations colony or base, and it was originally in the shape of a swastika
Yeah.
because of the Germans, and then they since filled it in.
Hmm.
So there's lots of testimony about these places that we're on the moon and Mars with these technologies and far beyond in other places. And it's almost hilarious if the irony of how advanced these technologies are and how far in space and time and places humanity has gone. And
Hmm.
a lot of people think it's a big deal for a man to step foot on the moon, Neil Armstrong back in the 60s. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I tell you too, when I because I was trained by one of the members of the Stargate unit, and during intermediate, the graduating target was, and it's like I said, it's always blind, was Area 51.
Hmm.
So I had my after myself and other colleagues had gone through school. We, obviously we talk about what happened. Um, my experience, I picked up on a lot of interesting things, stuff like that, but um, a lot of weirdness. But one of the students I know for a fact he had such a bad experience. Something was like launched at him. He went when he went back home. He was having missing time. He was seeing. He's got a big property. He was seeing, taking photographs, seeing stuff on his property. He actually had to have like a friend of ours like get these things off of him.
So yeah, so
Um,
guys, Area 51 is a horrible freaking target for graduating students of remote viewing.
yes, yes, it is. Uh,
Why would
and
you pick
also,
that?
oh, but my friend had sketched a Stargates, one going to the Mars, one going, and then another one going to the moon. And
Hmm.
so it's just interesting. That seems to be, yeah,
That's
it's
big
just wow.
because Alex Collier speaks about this. And he talks out in like the 80s he was contacted by the Andromedan Council, and I know some people they love Alex, some people they disagree with Alex. I Wherever you are on him, I think it's a significant piece of information that he revealed. And he's also talking about reptilians eating humans back in the day, when no one else was doing it, even before Phil Schneider, maybe even.
Hmm.
And he talks about how the Andromedan Council notified him back in the 1980s that if humanity underneath the Draco Reptilian Empire was continually used and abused to become this like super soldier force under the Draco Reptilians, that we would use Earth, the Moon, and Mars as military launching points to then go out and take over the rest of the known universe using stargates and fleets. And so when you pick out Area 51, the Moon, and Mars, you're like, well, why? That's probably why. I mean, having said that, there's also apparently stuff on Saturn, I think, and also Jupiter. There's some huge stargates off of Jupiter that the ETs use.
Yeah, so you mentioned Alex Collier. Yeah, I remember him. He's I am familiar with him. Um, and there's somebody else in particular. Okay, yes, you mentioned Philip Schneider. I think they did I believe Courtney did a project on him as well, and they basically described his story. Another guy who seemed completely genuine. Um, really interesting guy.
It is
And
definitely genuine.
yeah,
It is 100% genuine. His
um,
father was a paperclip Nazi, Otto Schneider, I believe.
yeah.
You know,
So where are we now? So the United States. I mean, you mentioned the TRB-3. They have these craft. I mean, that must have been reverse engineered. Are they are they tactical? I mean, are they an offensive to some of these
yeah,
things?
yeah, they have weapons. They have weapons and shields, and they're powered by 0 point energy, is according to reporting that I've heard. And there are actually aircraft carrier type size versions. That's where the USS Hillenketter comes from, with
Mhm.
Solar Warden. And so these TR-3Bs, it seems like they're a mix of being fighters and scout craft, because they're not necessarily very large. But then you've got the larger operational size craft, like aircraft carrier size vehicles.
Now, are you familiar? Now, this guy, this is, I'm sure you're familiar with him. Um, and he's out there, okay? But I'll tell you, when he talks about some of this stuff, I was like, oh God, I ran into so much of this. Like in RV, as it pertains to some of the things he mentions. David Icke, what are your thoughts on his work? I mean, have you seen it?
Yeah, I say it's kind of like this. I think David Icke has done a lot of great work, and then I'm always kind of cautious of him because I see him as being a potentially used asset. So, for example, he can do all this amazing work to expose the reptilians and the royal family and the secret Illuminati governments and the ET connection going all the way back to like the African tribes, with that one shaman, Chetway and Credo, right? Or Credo, whatever his name is, sharing amazing knowledge. And then the other side could program him to go on to the BBC on international television and say, "I'm Jesus Christ," like what the, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
kind of like, what? You just screwed up a lot, buddy. You just,
yeah.
and so that's where it's like, as someone who's a volunteer organizer in the movement, I always like to say, take the best, right, like of what resonates, and then be ready for some garbage to be thrown in, but don't let that dishearten you and say, "Oh my God, he claimed this crazy thing, therefore everything he said is BS."
Mhm.
It's like, make sure you're always using your discernment and keeping it in context.
Yeah, I mean, we talked. I don't want to mention his name, but we talked there. I was getting trolled by a guy for days. We talked about because he did have. I believed him, and then he just. But there's other. There's people are human. They got egos and they or whatever the case, or,
Well,
or
well
like literally he had. Yeah.
let me make it easy. Let me make it easy. People who don't like the information, they don't want the information, or it scares them, which is usually where it's coming from. It's a place of fear because it's potentially bursting their comfort bubble of safe space thinking, right? Um, you know, and so therefore they try to make it about Freudianism. Oh, you're doing this and saying this because you want money, you want fame, you were a loser as a kid, and now this is your way to be a big person. And they're trying to personalize it.
Hmm.
Okay, but what I like to say is, okay, David Icke is one source, but just during this conversation, we mentioned like three or four or five or 10 other people who talk about reptilians eating people and blood products and the Alpha Draconian Empire. So,
Hmm.
at the point where they just want to make it about David Icke, they've already revealed themselves as a
Hmm.
troll or someone who is a know-nothing who refuses to learn.
Yeah, yeah. Another. I mean, I see. Have you ever talked to Nancy Thames?
Yes, Nancy Thames, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, she seems like she's really passionate about it. She seems genuine. There's an author back in the day I read, and I was a kid when I read his book, and I wonder if you seem like I'm guessing you do, you have, but I might be wrong. I'd be surprised if I've read a book about this topic that you have not read. So, but do you remember a guy by the name of Jim Sparks?
Heard that the name sounds familiar, but I haven't read anything by him. What was his book?
It was, gosh, I forgot. Oh gosh, I forgot what it was called. But basically, he was having these experiences, stuff like that. Not necessarily the space program, but he had experiences with this group, and that was telling him, we've tried giving your people like clean energy and stuff like this, and you've turned around and made bombs out of it and weapons and all this and that. Um, but just the way he described, because he had a lot of recall. He wasn't
Hmm.
shut off. Like he got a trust with these beings. Oh, I lost you. I lost you. Oh, there you go. Can I
Oh,
hear you?
I'm
Oh, there
here.
you go.
I'm here.
Okay, okay. I'm sure you're familiar with Whitley Strieber.
Yeah, Whitley Strieber. Yeah, and I got to meet him at Contact in the Desert earlier this year. It was quite a pleasure.
Oh, wow, amazing. Yeah, yeah. Another guy that truly, admittedly, does not know necessarily what's going on, just giving you his perspective of this very weird situation. And even via remote viewing, some of this stuff that some of these beings do is so bizarre. It's hard to really grasp it from a human perspective. Now, space, like like Tony and Sirius B and all that, and I wonder, we have all this technology and they're doing all these things. What's really the currency out there? What's the value? What's the trade? And what does
The
come
trade
to
is human is humans.
humans in in biological DNA stuff. It's the first thing that comes
That's
to my
easy.
mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of it is to put it in context, there's so many different groupings of so many different ETs with so many different agendas, and then some of them are truthful and then some of them are liars. Sometimes you even have the rogue US military types impersonating the ETs. Okay. I mean, you might have somebody who they are a legitimate starseed hybrid ET contactee, and then because they are contacted by ETs, the governments are able to detect sometimes these gamma ray bursts when like these craft come and visit somebody. Okay, now they target that person. So now, you might be a positive ET contactee and you have a nice time with the positive ETs, but then a couple weeks later you can get abducted by the militaries. Okay, and they might show the real faces. They might masquerade as ETs to then interrogate you. And then, now you're giving your testimony. It's like, well, are the ETs positive? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they really ETs? Are they humans? And then imagine trying to remote view that right in one session and then figure it out. And maybe you'll figure it out. Maybe you'll get some weird what the heck is going on. You might need five more remote viewers and 10 more sessions to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of my best friends currently was a client who, was blind again. I set up through a project manager. He had missing time, and he had suspected that he was abducted, and that's what I got out of it. Yeah. So, um, and after that, I had kind of a debrief, and I talked to him. He's such a sweet guy. I ended up teaching him some remote viewing and stuff. So, but what really, again, I've been reading these abduction accounts since I was a child, and what I've come to terms with many years ago is that these don't all have to be happening for it to be real. One of them does.
Oh,
You know what I
this,
mean?
I mean,
So yeah,
especially as a remote viewer, I gotta say,
yeah,
David, it's
yeah,
like, man, get past the is it real or not,
yeah.
because this is the deal. As long as you're at the level of is it real or not, and there's that kind of benefit of the doubt, you know, it's very different from this stuff is real, it's visceral, it's terrible. We need to do something about it yesterday.
Hmm.
And that's just my advice is especially if you're a remote viewer and you're getting to access this stuff in a way that the vast majority of people so far are not yet able to do. I'd hope that you'd be able to put the doubt out of your mind after a certain time
Yeah,
in this field.
yeah, yeah. And it's tough because, and I do. You know what I mean? If somebody put a gun to my head right now and said, what is the, I've got to say, because I've experienced it myself, and I've been experienced it in abundance.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
but what you have in the remote viewing field is, um, there's a lot of regimes that are very, they just want to keep this is like, magic in a lab coat type of thing. Like it's like, it's science and this and that, and there's no verification stuff. But
There's a niche for that, but those people are boring. You
yeah,
know, I I
yeah, yeah,
I I
yeah.
I I think it's boring for the people who they focus more on keeping the remote viewing clinical and pure and scientific
Hmm.
rather than focusing on the results of what
Hmm.
is
Oh
coming
yeah,
back to
yeah,
them.
yeah. And as a remote viewer, like when I do stuff of my own, and I always on my show, I say, if it's just myself, I say, guys, I invite you to go task somebody on it yourself, see what you get. But I even with Elle, I'm doing this project. I'm collaborating with her quite a bit now because she's really trying to get stuff out there, and I could kind of help her with that with my own
Yeah,
data for whatever she's got.
she's very goal oriented
Yes,
about disclosure.
absolutely. I mean, that's why she's
Yeah.
doing it. I mean,
For
she's
her,
just,
yeah, for her, it's disclosure and remote viewing is part of that.
yeah,
She's not remote viewing and then, oh, maybe she'll throw in some disclosure.
yeah. I mean, she
Yeah.
has. I mean, that's why I said to her. I said, "Eh, and again, you get to know some of these people. Like I don't know, but I met Elle, and totally sweet, totally genuine, totally
Hi, it's
upfront. Yeah,
Ileana.
yeah. And she's a powerhouse remote viewer. And
Yes.
I
Yeah.
told her, I'm just like, where have you been hiding? But she doesn't know interest in any of that stuff. She has no interest in what like remote viewing doing, with all their,
She cares about disclosure in the SSP. She's
yeah.
documenting the shenanigans.
And I've heard Penny talk a little bit about vibrations. I mean, she sounds like she's got some very keen insight. What was her position? What did she do in the SSP? What was her role?
Penny Bradley.
Yes.
So she's got a number of roles. For one, it seems like she already has like Anunnaki DNA, and I believe what they did is to her is they used CRISPR technology on her when she was still in the womb to inject that into her when she's still in the womb to have her have some hybridization of reptilian DNA. Okay, and so what that did is in terms of these super soldier programs, they do a lot of this hybridization to get various things. Someone like that, that'd be someone like if they're has Anunnaki DNA, then they tend to be very psychic, which Penny is. Okay, if you add reptilian DNA, like Draco type DNA, that would probably make her even more psychically powerful. And then not only that, most your standard issue human, like if we
Hmm.
were to hang out in the presence of a Draco reptilian and we were too close to them for too long, like 15 minutes, we would be dead. Apparently, they emit that intense, a low vibration fear energy. I mean, I like to think about trying to get into a bathtub with an electric eel. How long you
Yeah,
gonna last?
yeah. Yeah, it's
Okay,
like a
and
negative polarity and a positive polarity just shorting out. Like they can't be on the same current. It's just,
yeah, you're gonna
yeah,
get zapped and fried out. And
right.
so, unless you've got something that allows you to energetically handle it, and so um, that's kind of more Penny's experience, like some of Penny's background, and then what she did in the programs. She did a number of things because she was in a number of programs. She's one of these people where if you got psychic ability and like you can handle it around the reptilians, okay,
Multifaceted,
right, then
using
they'll
to your
use you
best
for a
potential.
bunch of
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Mm.
And so it seems like one of the most, I guess, for me, interesting things she got to do was be a navigator on some of the Nachtwaffen Dark Fleet ships that the Nazi Germans in space use. And she was a navigator, and she talks about having to drink certain amounts of black goo because the black goo, even though it's a negative type physical entity embodiment of like this um, negative AI. It's like a quantum computing AI that's evil. It shuts down your emotions a bit, but also makes you more intelligent. It makes you stronger, makes you faster, makes you need less food. And so she talks about taking some of that to enhance her IQ to enable her to help navigate the ships through hyperspace.
So, from your perspective, and what would you, because you collaboratively, what would you say the pecking order is, if there is one, species wise within the SSP? So, I mean, obviously, you get this reptilian faction, this or the
Yeah,
Draco, really
it's like
nasty.
basically the Draco Reptilian are kind of in charge of everything for this is like their empire, and then regionally they've got like the Anunnaki who have like local interests and have always dealt with them to work with them to like exploit humanity together. Okay. And then you've got the insectoid races, which are generally super old and wise and advanced, but they've got sellouts of their own who then will work under the reptilians and their empire together with the Anunnaki and the Greys, who are probably the lowest, or they're the lowest on the totem pole.
Mm,
Okay. To then um, manage all of us. So we're not even
mm.
on the totem pole, we're the farm animals.
So even the German, the Third Reich, human perspective, are they still relatively low as far
Oh
as
yeah.
that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The reptilians treat them like shit, and that's part of the um a point of contention, in the apparently the German space program is they don't like having to have some of them or a lot of people don't like having to have a reptilian officer able to access the ship whenever they want, and they can commandeer your ship whenever they want to do whatever they want. Would you like that as a crew member or
Hmm.
much less a captain? Heck no.
Right, right. Yeah. So the Anunnaki, does she describe their physical characteristics? Were they more human looking Anunnaki?
So part of it is, I think part of the confusion is you've got the Anunnaki who are like the more pure blood space Anunnaki, who they're like super tall and pale and hairless. and they kind of look probably more like the engineers depicted in the Aliens movies,
Okay. Yeah.
right? And but they're not as muscular necessarily. And then you've got the more what I call like the barbarian Jason Momoa barbarian types, who John Whitberg he says they're called the Creole. They're basically the Anunnaki who went from being white albino. They came down here, they interbred with humanity, they hybridize, and then they're the ones who look like the Babylonian, like the King Gilgamesh, with like the beards. They look like Jason Momoa, and they're really bronzed and tanned. And they've got like the one crypt where they found like the body of King Gilgamesh that's on the
Hmm.
internet there.
Yeah.
That so it's like they're both Anunnaki, but one is like the pure blood version, and the other, the Creole, they're the ones who went native. They're both Anunnaki, but if you looked at them and just looked at one and the other and said, "Oh, those are two totally different races. They have nothing to do with each other, or what's going on here?" And you said, "Wait, how's that Anunnaki? How's that Anunnaki?" Well, over like thousands or hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years, even they're interacting and changing and morphing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the elites. Um, we when I read Tony's book, which oh God, like will get you to like your core. Like if you're even the littlest bit, if you have a speck of humanity in you, it's brutal. I mean, I love the book. It was an interesting read, um, but his experience was so brutal, um, and to talk about it, it's a whole other thing. Um, but you look at the guy, and he seems like he's made his peace with it. He's got he knows it's beyond his what he did. But I guess my point is from if I remember correctly, is there were I think he said there were humans in some of these pits that were in there and just with these horrible ideas, making them do things they didn't want to do. Um, so even so, it does seem like there is this faction of elites on some level that have made some kind of agreements to
Oh yeah.
rub elbows with these forces.
Well, not necessarily rub elbows because they'll never be accepted as peers. Like I can't ever imagine like a Draco reptilian commander ever like rubbing shoulder elbows. It's like I
Yeah,
don't even think
yeah,
that's in
yeah,
their culture,
yeah.
you know. But it's more like what's depicted in um well, they live, I guess, but it's no, the humans are kind of intermingling with the ETs more and they live, but it's like you got to sell out humans, right? Like the guy who's a bum and now he's in a tuxedo because he's willing to sell out humanity.
Mhm.
And essentially that's what the so-called elites are this whole time, is these have been inbred, weak-willed humans who have been easy to manipulate this whole time because they're willing to sell out humanity as long as they get the mansions and yachts and they don't get thrown in the concentration camps. They'll throw their own mother and family and children into those concentration camps as long as they themselves don't have to. And then, of course, they'll have their own justifications. Oh, if I didn't do it, they'd do it, and all that. But at the end of the day, that's all they are. They're loser opportunists who are spiritually bankrupt, and I guess I feel for them because they've got a really difficult road to hoe, not just for the rest of this incarnation, but in future ones.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder too, because if others out there that took that same exact journey that Tony did, okay, or at least that aspect of it, um, and they do happen to be one of the few that, or they're starting to have recall and all that. My first instinct would be to push it away. You know what I mean? So there may be very well where those some of these people are having these, and I'm glad that he put this out too because it may actually spark some
It
memories of these other
galvanized.
people. Exactly.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, seeing Tony's interview on Journey to Truth on one of them because he's done several, but one of his early interviews, that's really what helped to spark me into reaching out to a lot of the Montauk survivors and SSP people and to follow Journey to Truth, and then off of that be inspired to do this work and do what I can to contribute.
So this secret space program, you're doing a great job doing it.
Thank you.
Um, this the secret space program. I guess this is the big the big M Night Shyamalan twist is we're the bad guys. We're working for the bad guys, against our will to some degree. Because on the other side of this, especially from
That's in the
Courtney's,
twist the whole time, is
yeah,
that we've
yeah,
been enslaved this whole time. Yeah,
yeah.
that's your disclosure. Hey guys, we've been enslaved this whole time with Draco reptilian ETs and sell out loser Farian humans who, and we need to change that. Yep. Yeah.
And from Courtney's perspective, because I want to go to the other side of this,
Hmm.
which because I from so because what we're looking at here to me is this is all kind of coming together here. Excuse me, is the Galactic Federation or the Galactic this not just according to Courtney, but also other things that I've seen in people's testimony and everything else seem to be this other force, hopefully trying to get us out of this. Is that how your take on it?
Yeah, yes and no. Okay, so this is a deal. The Galactic Federation is probably made up of so many different ET races, and they've got so many different interests, even though in general they want positive galactic brotherhood and sisterhood and commerce and trade and friendship and not attacking each other. That part, as a federation, that's great. But then within that federation, my understanding and per the reporting of the Farsight Institute and others, they've got like what Audrey Walters talks about is I've asked her, what is like the Galactic Federation? What does it even look like? And she's like, there's that scene in the Star Wars movies where they have like the Galactic Senate and they're in like this giant area space with like
Mm-hmm.
these like levitating platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's
Yeah.
like a center platform where like that's kind of like where the main focus is, where you got the main stage to address everybody. She says it's like that. And just like that, you're going to have the senators like, we need to, you know, help free the humans, and you know, uh, if we don't, the
It's messy.
reptilians
It's
are
political. It's a democracy.
right,
It's yeah,
right,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
right,
yeah.
and there are others are like, no, hands off, prime directive,
Mm-hmm.
and then there may be others who might be compromised by their Draco, and they're in the Galactic Federation. Who knows,
Yeah.
right? So, but I would say that in general, yeah, they serve as a counterbalance to the Draco reptilians, and so by that regards, and the fact that in the main they tend to you regard and follow universal law and respect the prime directive, right? Then I would say in this game, they're the good guys, clearly, clearly. But are
Mm-hmm.
they perfect? No. Do I love and support them uncritically? No. Will I work with them to the extent I need to do to liberate humanity and the earth? Absolutely. And then maybe once we get to that footing, we can, discuss more as Earth as a sovereign territory rather
Mm-hmm.
than you know, getting, a ward, if you will, of the Galactic Federation, you
Mm-hmm.
know. It's like great, we're not under the reptilians anymore, but now we're part of this federation, but then how much sovereignty do we really have? And then these are a lot of the questions of how much work we do and how much humanity comes up as a
Mm-hmm.
as a species, as a global society.
And see, this is another interesting thing too, from my perspective, is we have this disclosure going on. It's going very slow, but it's at least going. At least, oh well, yeah, they're okay. So
It's
there
going.
is
It's
there is some
going.
truth there. That there is some truth to that. Okay, there is actually this recovery program that went on back then. Like all this stuff's like coming out. Okay, which they're only giving us this of that. Um, but as it's happening, you have we've got this war happening that with Ukraine now. Some you got it. Just seems like not that wars don't happen, they do, but it's interesting to me. Um, it's almost like there's just all it's like a pressure point. It feels like all this stuff is culminating at the same thing.
There's
Because
a
I
reason
don't
why. Well,
go
there's a
ahead.
reason why. So first of all, when you talk about Ukraine specifically, that's basically the homeland of the Khazarian mafia. These are the Sabbatean Frankists that masquerade as being Jews, and they're not. So I'm going to say right off, I'm not anti-Semitic, because they're not Jews. The
Mm,
Rothschilds, for example, are what are known as Sabbatean Frankist Khazarian mafia. And so when that was established, Ukraine, in 2014 under the Hillary Clinton State Department, that's a neo-Nazi Satanist stronghold. And so that's why so much money has been laundered there. That's why so much human trafficking is there. That's why Ukraine has always been set up as the West's spearhead to thrust into the side of Russia, formerly the Soviet Union. And back when, Russia, the empire existed, and then the Soviet Union existed, there never was a separate state known as Ukraine. So it's there's a reason why is that here on Earth right now, if you talk about liberation of Earth, the main strongholds of the Khazarian mafia right now remaining would probably be the Ukraine, Israel, Switzerland, and the Vatican. And I could say why for each one of those.
Go ahead.
Um, so the Ukraine, like I said, was the Khazarian mafia stronghold, which is where a lot of their Illuminati cabal tradition stems from. That's kind of like their spiritual homeland. Okay, and their money laundering and human trafficking. That's why, and then spearhead into Russia. So that's why Ukraine. The Vatican has always been the spiritual evil holy center for the Draco reptilians here on Earth. They've orchestrated a lot of their stuff through the Catholic Church
Mm.
and the popes.
Yeah, I mean, good God, if anybody has a would have a better grasp of physical antiquity and knowledge of this stuff, of the history behind it and all that, it's got to be the Catholic Church, and it's got
Yeah,
to be sitting in the basement of that
it is.
Vatican, that nobody can
Absolutely.
see. You know,
Right. Yep.
um,
Yep.
I have very little doubt of that. I mean, it just and that's what really. Um, and you look at the big scope of things. Here's what's crazy to me. So now that we've governments are admitting that there is this presence, we and from what they say, we don't have any control. We really don't know what their intentions are. This, that, and the other. Okay. So you admitted that. So now we're getting to this point, and why are we fighting with each other? So you're admitting that there's a species out there that's way more advanced. We're not the alpha species, and we're still chucking rocks at each other down here. I mean,
Because
does that
it's a
make any
very
sense?
it does. It absolutely does. From their perspective, it's a think of the most complex rat race maze thing, rat maze that you could ever stick
Device.
human beings into. And you're in charge of the rat maze. Okay, and now the rat maze is starting, you're starting to lose control of the rat maze. People are waking up to this stuff. Hollywood might be getting cleaned out. The people on that island, maybe they are being rounded up behind the scenes. A lot of mass resignations of CEOs. The English royal family seems to be dying off at a very rapid pace. And so as this stuff happens, they those forces, the human forces, the minions of the Draco reptilians and Anunnaki here on Earth, they're struggling to maintain power. Just like the reptilians up there, they're struggling to maintain enough of a military presence that they can continue to ward off the Galactic Federation. Okay, who then, maybe they're not militarily, any individual member is as strong, but if you put together the whole Galactic Federation, that might be significant enough to throw against the Draco and the Anunnaki. Um, the Switzerland, that it's in Lake Geneva, apparently the Octagon Group, the heads of the CIA, they have an underwater base at the bottom of Lake Geneva, like some kind of a bubble fortress base. Okay, so that's why Switzerland. So those would be like some three of the main places left to clean up on the planet.
Yeah, I will say too that I've done just, and again, I've probably done like literally close to 1,000 targets at this point, but um, I've done a lot of dumbs, a lot of bases, a lot of underground bases, and there is a world right below our feet. I mean, they're using nuclear, I mean, or whatever. I mean, they have these. I mean, there's probably better stuff out there, but they already have these nuclear drills that are boring out holes that are massive, um, and they just keep building and digging down there underneath the guise of human eyes. They don't need to bring everything up top. They could just bring it below, or they can bring it up.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
just we're missing it all. But it's interesting that Courtney did. Courtney talks about this the spectrum of the lighting in your camera, and because now our cameras are fast enough, I have them actually. I don't even have to affect. I don't even have to change the spectrum of the light. Is all I have to do because I live in Florida down here. There's so many. Is all I have to do is maximize the frame rate. I catch them all the time.
yep. They said
Thousands.
120. Yeah, it's 120 frames per second and higher. And then if you can kit it out to be an infrared camera, then even better.
Yeah, yeah. They've been here the whole time. They're moving so incredibly fast. They're out of the frame. I mean, I will catch like at the fastest rate I can get. Courtney's got the expensive, real fancy one, but even with mine, I get them just in a frame, and then I'll click it one more time, and it's gone. Um, so yeah, it's definitely yeah. I think they're doing good work over there. What else?
I,
What else is happening
I,
on that venue? Go ahead.
I just want to say for the Farsight Institute, they've taken remote viewing to a whole nother level. They've taken it to the level where they're literally ambassadors for humanity to the ETs, the positives and the negatives,
Mhm.
to voice, to be our voice in many ways as to what we as a population want. And
Mhm.
so, my hats are off to them because I personally kind of poo-poo on the academic approach to all of this stuff. And I've got a much more goal-oriented approach. Like I don't care about the science. I care about you had me at liberating humanity, saving the kids,
Yeah. Right.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't sign up for this to remote view the DMV. I did it so I could find some answers, learn some things, expand, grow. Um, yeah, and I think a lot of that comes out of the military regime. They try and keep a lockdown on the story, the narrative, that's what I was trained by. But I ended up cutting ties with it because it's ugly over there. Um, but Harvey, I don't know, I'm sure
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I was
Harvey's an
actually
ET emissary that Courtney Brown and the Farsight team interact with, who's represents the Galactic Federation.
I did a cowboy remote viewing session blind for Daz Smith, um, in front of a bunch of people, and the target was Harvey. So I did get a chance to talk to Harvey. Um, he seemed nice, very intelligent. Really reminded me like of an Elon Musk type, like very brainy type thing. And I can't remember the detail of the conversation, but I did pick up on a consciousness that basically matched up with who he's speaking with. And if these cameras continue to get better, they may be able to detect him one day. Would not surprise me. I mean, they
Maybe
figured
if
out how to
these,
pick up. Yeah,
I'm wondering if they use a dicyanin on the lens, that might work.
yeah. I mean, I've seen what I've seen. What's weird is like I've seen these ghost cameras, and so these ghost things where they've got these like a dot matrix come out of a person, and he's like doing things and everything like that. So that's because I think that's where this is all going. I mean, we're able to perceive a greater scope of reality via technology. We're picking up on different frequencies, different aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum, and we've been missing it this whole time. It's been right under our nose. So yeah, I
More
think
will
they're
be
doing a
revealed. I think as time goes on, more will be revealed. I think we are ascending from third density to fourth and fifth density consciousness. And so it's going to be much more commonplace. More and more people are going to be more telepathic and able to see auras and interacting with other entities and beings that aren't visible to the rest of us. And I
Mhm.
think that's a good thing. That's totally fine.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen I talk to my colleagues all the time about this. Is the remote viewers coming out more and more from me perspectively, it seems almost like a generational thing. Like it's almost like every generation keeps getting more. I mean, you look back at the Stargate guys, it's not that impressive comparatively to what like we're doing now. in my opinion. And I don't think it's me per se. I think it's like I
Yeah.
think we're getting to a crossroads, almost like a psychic, a growth spurt, a potential. Like we're getting to that point, and I think some people are just a little early to the party. But that's why remote viewing, not just for that so much, but the other doors that it's opened. It's allowed me to perceive many other things. Gifts come with it if you know.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Once you open that door, I'm sure a lot more opens up.
Yeah, I mean, because you when you do these targets, especially these ones with ETs and stuff, and it's the same experience. It's like as they describe it, Farsight. If you get it too close and you're remote viewing an extraterrestrial, telepathy is kind of their mainstay. That's how they everybody. If everybody's telepathic, they really don't have to worry about languages.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you're there, they know you're there. They just know, and you know they'll interact with them. Most of the time, sometimes you'll run into some nasty ones, but most of the time they'll just ignore you, kind of thing. But uh, but so yeah. So I appreciate you coming on, Brian, and I'll have to come on again, and we'll talk about we'll
My
go in a different
pleasure.
direction. And I think you're doing a great job. I love seeing your work. I plan on going out to the next conference. I'm glad the last one was such a success. And like I said, just keep up the great work, and thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. Everyone who's listening, please keep your eye out on fulldisclosuremovement.org. That's all one word for next year's 2025 conference. I'm also on the Disclosure Now podcast with Arkeem Ra. You can find me on Facebook. Add not only my name, Brian Tseng, Tseng, but also add my nickname, Solar Bee, and I'll pop up. And please send me a message about how you'd like to get involved with the Full Disclosure Now movement.
Sounds good, Brian. Thanks, guys, and catch me at or remember to like, subscribe, and share the content. If you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com, and we'll catch you next time.
All
Thanks,
right.
guys.
Cheers, David. Thank you.